Hello everyone, welcome to today's story. A woman returns to the old farmhouse with nothing but her child in her arms. She dreams of peace, yet finds herself tangled in gratitude, secrets, and emotions she never expected. Why does CEO Alex, a man of power, secretly bring her gifts and care for her in silence? Why was his mother so happy when he brought Lytuna home? Does it mean acceptance or something deeper? And when Alex's sister begins to suspect their bond, will she allow this fragile connection to survive? Every silence hides a choice. Every glance carries a storm. Stay until the end of the video to discover how love, family, and duty weave into Lytuna's life. If you enjoy stories filled with drama, romance, and unexpected turns, don't forget to subscribe and help us reach 10,000 followers. Your support means the world, and it keeps these heartfelt stories alive. The morning light spilled gently across the wooden beams of the small farmhouse, painting the air with a quiet sense of renewal. Lytuna stood at the threshold, her arms cradling her infant son Henry, as though the child himself was the fragile promise of a different tomorrow. The soil beneath her feet was familiar yet foreign. This was the land of her childhood, now transformed into the stage of her second beginning. Her voice, soft yet unwavering, carried the weight of both confession and vow. She had returned not just for herself, but for the small life pressed against her chest. Henry's breathing, steady and innocent, became her compass. The laughter of the past was gone, replaced by the silent duty of motherhood, and every sunrise would demand resilience from her weary heart. Around her, the countryside awakened in muted colors. Fields stretching far and wide, dew still clinging to the grass, the call of distant roosters blending into the rhythm of a life less hurried. Yet beneath the calm, shadows stirred within her mind. The doubts of leaving too soon, the fear of facing burdens alone. But for Henry, she would anchor herself. She whispered his name, Henry, as though it were both prayer and shield. In this stillness, the world felt suspended, an in-between space where the past had loosened its grip, but the future remained a mystery. The farmhouse was no palace, the land no kingdom, but here, under the modest sky, a new story was waiting to be written. For Lytuna, this was the threshold between sorrow and strength, between what was lost and what could still be found. The days unfolded with a rhythm both tender and exhausting. Inside the modest farmhouse, Lytuna moved like a quiet current of water, sweeping the floor, boiling rice, rocking Henry in her arms as the morning stretched into noon. The small child's laughter, fragile and fleeting, was enough to paint warmth across her weary face. Yet every task carried weight, as though each breath was both survival and sacrifice. Outside, life carried a different cadence. Alex, dressed in the stillness of authority, walked the farmlands with Lon, his secretary. Their conversation circled around yields of cassava, the promise of expanding mills, and the delicate balance between trust and profit. The sun pressed heavily on the fields, glinting off green leaves that promised harvest, while Alex's voice carried both calculation and care. His footsteps sank into the soil as though testing not only the land, but his own responsibility. The two worlds, Lytuna's fragile domesticity and Alex's commanding industry, seemed parallel, never crossing yet invisibly tethered. For while she prepared herbal baths for Henry, Alex thought of supplies, markets, and the steady survival of those who labored the earth. Their lives echoed the same pursuit of continuity, though one was framed by the laughter of a child and the other by the numbers of contracts, and in the silence between them, a question lingered. Could peace truly bloom in such fragile soil? Tuna's existence at the farmhouse was serene, yet the serenity was fragile, like porcelain left in the rain. Beautiful, but vulnerable to the smallest crack. Even as she whispered lullabies to Henry, somewhere in the fields, Alex's voice lingered, a presence she could not quite escape. The sun was already leaning westward when Alex's shadow appeared at the gate of the farmhouse. He carried no grandeur, only bundles of small necessities: an old-fashioned mosquito net, a plastic basin, a wooden wardrobe too modest for his stature as a CEO. His hands, usually holding contracts and pens, now bore the quiet weight of objects meant for comfort. Tuna hesitated as he entered, her eyes betraying both gratitude and unease. The room seemed suddenly smaller, filled with the scent of new wood and Alex's calm presence. "For the baby," he murmured, setting down the wardrobe with deliberate care, as though he feared the walls might crumble if he moved too quickly. She protested gently, insisting he should not spend so much, but her words dissolved into the air, fragile against his steady insistence. Henry slept soundly in the corner, unaware that invisible lines were being drawn around him. Alex bent over, adjusting the wardrobe's place, his fingers lingering on the edge as though arranging more than furniture, as though arranging a fragile sanctuary for mother and child. The silence between him and Tuna carried the weight of all that remained unsaid. Outside, the cicadas droned, their chorus weaving into the stillness of the room. Tuna's heart tightened. She was indebted, bound by kindness too great to return. Yet beneath that debt was something unspoken, a pulse of warmth that frightened her as much as it comforted her. Alex, meanwhile, said nothing more. His care was quiet, practical, almost invisible, yet it lingered like a lantern lit in a room too dark to ignore. That evening, as the wind pressed gently against the wooden shutters, Alex's voice carried a soft suggestion. "You should call your family, just to ease their hearts." The words, simple yet weighted, stirred something within Tuna. She knew he was right. With trembling fingers she dialed. On the other end, her brother's voice erupted with both relief and reproach. "Why didn't you tell me? Walking back alone, carrying the child, what if something had happened?" His words were stern, but beneath them was a pulse of fear. Tuna bit her lip, her voice quiet, promising she was well. Yet shame lingered in her chest, pressing heavier than his scolding. True to his word, her brother soon arrived. The farmhouse door opened to the presence of family, strong, protective, familiar. He placed a small gift by Henry's side, his expression softening as he watched the child stir. "You should be with us," he urged, his tone gentler now. "Home is safer. You won't have to struggle alone." Tuna lowered her gaze, torn between duty and gratitude. Her brother's presence was like the roots of an old tree, anchoring her to where she had come from. Yet her eyes flickered toward the new wardrobe Alex had brought, the simple proof of his care. "I must stay," she whispered. "I owe Alex too much. I cannot just walk away." The words settled into the room like mist, neither fully vanishing nor lifting. Her brother sighed, resigned yet unwilling to sever the bond. Between them stretched an invisible thread, family pulling her one way, gratitude binding her another. Days later, in the gentle hush of twilight, Alex spoke of his mother. His voice, usually firm with business, softened into something more fragile. "When I brought you home once," he said, almost as if confessing, "my mother was so happy. She kept smiling, saying you seemed kind, and that Henry was a blessing." Lytuna paused, her hands resting on Henry's blanket. The image of Alex's mother, warm, welcoming, rose in her mind like a fragile light through clouds. She had expected judgment, perhaps distance, yet instead there had been joy. It was as though the older woman had seen not burden, but possibility. The farmhouse seemed to breathe differently after those words. The walls no longer felt so bare, the silence no longer so heavy. Somewhere in the vast emptiness of her new life, a thread of belonging had been woven. Alex's mother had not only accepted her presence, she had welcomed it. That thought alone felt like an anchor, holding her steady in waters she feared might drown her. Lytuna's chest ached with quiet longing. Could she allow herself to believe in such acceptance? Could she believe that this was not just charity, but a chance for something gentler, more enduring? The shadows of her past whispered doubts, yet the echo of Alex's words was undeniable. Henry stirred in his sleep, his small fist curling. Lytuna brushed his hair and exhaled. Perhaps the world was not entirely unkind. Perhaps, in the quiet grace of Alex's mother's smile, there was room for her and Henry to begin again. Yet, where warmth was found, shadows soon followed. In the silence beyond the farmhouse walls, another voice began to stir. Alex's sister. She had watched from afar, her eyes sharp with suspicion, her heart unsettled by the quiet closeness forming between her brother and Lytuna. Alone in her chamber, she whispered to herself, words heavy as iron. It cannot be. The thought of Alex, once so steadfast and untouchable, now bending toward a woman burdened with a child, unsettled her like a storm rising beyond the horizon. She imagined the whispers, the judgments, the unseen weight of society pressing against their family name, and deeper still, she feared losing the brother she thought she knew. Her resolve sharpened with every passing hour. "I must see for myself," she murmured, eyes narrowing as though piercing the distance between her and the farmhouse. "If she truly holds his heart, then I will not let it stand." The world outside remained quiet, crickets calling, the moon lifting pale light over the fields. Yet within her, the quiet was deceptive. She carried not the warmth of her mother, but the steel of someone unwilling to yield. Where Alex had offered sanctuary, and his mother had offered joy, his sister carried a different gift: doubt, suspicion, and the will to protect what she believed was theirs alone. The stage was set not for confrontation in loud voices, but for the heavier battle of silence and questions. And in that silence, Lytuna's fragile peace trembled like glass. unaware of the storm that quietly approached. Night folded itself over the farmhouse, the kind of night where silence weighed more than words. Lytuna sat by Henry's bedside, watching the rise and fall of his chest as though every breath was a promise she must protect. The wardrobe Alex had brought stood nearby, modest yet firm, its presence a reminder of the care she could neither deny nor fully accept. Gratitude pressed heavily upon her, shaping itself into invisible chains. Her brother's voice echoed in memory, calling her back to family, to safety. Alex's mother's gentle acceptance lingered too, like a hand on her shoulder urging her forward into something unknown. And now, unseen but approaching, Alex's sister carried suspicion sharp enough to shatter this fragile world. Lytuna felt herself standing between tides, one pulling her to the shore of familiarity, the other toward waters untested yet strangely warm. She whispered to the night, not sure if it was to Henry, to herself, or to the silence that enclosed them. How do I choose? Between what I owe and what I long for, between peace and love. The lamp flickered as though answering, then steadied, its light casting long shadows against the walls, shadows that seemed to stretch like crossroads. For now there was no answer, only the slow beating of her heart and the rustling of leaves outside. Some choices reveal themselves not in haste, but in time. And perhaps the lesson was this: life's truest paths are often found in the stillness, where silence speaks louder than certainty, and where gratitude and love blur into the same trembling breath.
Lytuna trở về trang trại cùng con trai Henry bắt đầu hành trình mới đầy thử thách. Cô vừa chăm sóc con vừa gắng gượng xây dựng cuộc sống bình yên. Trong khi đó, CEO Alex bận rộn với công việc nhưng vẫn âm thầm quan tâm, mang đến cho mẹ con cô những vật dụng thiết yếu sửa sang lại ngôi nhà. Tử Nha Na cảm thấy biết ơn và nặng lòng mang ơn quá nhiều. Khi anh đến thăm, anh khuyên cô trở về sống cùng gia đình. Xong Tử Na quyết định ở lại để trả ơn Alex. Mẹ Alex thì vui mừng khi thấy con trai đưa về Tử Na, một dấu hiệu chấp nhận. Nhưng chị gái Alex lại nghi ngờ tình cảm giữa họ, quyết tâm không để mối quan hệ này xảy ra.